Yeah, I knew something was not right. And unfortunately, I'm young, I'm 30. I was 32 at the time of my diagnosis. The doctors, I mean, how often do you hear of a 32-year-old female getting diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer? My name is Stephanie, and I'm 33 years old. I like to before I was diagnosed, I was like going to the gym. I had a bunch of gym friends. I like to lift. I did a little cardio, but we lifted a lot of weights. Yeah. And I have a son. He is 15. He's a sophomore in high school. Okay. So my first symptoms, which to me, now that I know was colon cancer, I just, it's crazy. Like 3 years ago, I was getting stomach aches. I felt very bloated. I had not much energy, tired, and I just felt within me something was wrong. So I went to the doctor, and I just was like, I'm getting these terrible stomach pains. I feel like something's not right. Of course, they're like, you're active, you're healthy, your labs look good, but I always had low iron. So, they kind of just said, oh, maybe like change something within your diet and see if that takes away like the cramps and the bloating. No blood. So that's why I never thought like colon cancer, nothing. I had bowel movements, and I started like thinking, am I crazy? Because I would go to the doctor and he's like, nothing, I think everything's good. So then I was like, I am a female, menstrual cramps and whatnot. So then I went to the gynecologist, and I wasn't on birth control, but we were talking, and she's like, well, maybe due to your like heavy menstrual cycles, this is causing the pains in your stomach and whatnot. So then we went a whole route of doing birth control to like see if that would help and whatnot. But nothing seemed to help. And then um, one weekend I was out to lunch, and I couldn't even like stomach a bite of a French fry because that's how bad my stomach was hurting. I just knew something was wrong, so I couldn't eat. I like laughed. I was like, I need to go home and lay down. And I kind of had that feeling in me, like I was sick, but I wasn't sick. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I felt like I was going to throw up. Neither here nor there. I like called my mom, and she's like, maybe you caught the stomach flu. You have a stomach bug. Take some Pepto-Bismol. So I did that. And then the next morning, like the pain was still there. It was pretty bad. And I just knew, I called my mom and I was like, I should go to the ER. So she took me to the ER. She dropped me off. I went into the ER. I told, when they were checking me in, like, I'm getting terrible stomach pains. Like, I'm sick. I don't know. And, COVID is going on. So they're like, maybe you have COVID. We'll do a COVID test. No COVID. So the physician was like, I'm going to order a CT scan to like see what's going on in your abdomen. So we got the CT scan, and he came back and he's like, we found a mass in your stomach area, and we're going to have to admit you. And, like me, I'm 32. I'm like, you think worst case scenario, I'm scared. I'm like, what do I do? So I call my mom. I'm like, they found something in the CAT scan. They're going to admit me to the hospital. You have to come down. My mom came down. When they took me into a room, the nurse was like, we're going to have a gastro doctor come down and check you out. He came down and he's like, well, we really can't tell you what it is until we go inside and try to do a colonoscopy. So they tried to prep me for the colonoscopy. I drank I don't know what it's called, but it's like the shake you drink before you get a colonoscopy. So all night I couldn't drink. It was coming back up. I was very nauseous. They tried every nausea medicine there is, but nothing was working. So the nurse was like, I'm going to call the physician on call and see like what he suggests. So he must have gotten in touch with the gastro doctor, and they took me as the next case the first of the morning. So I had an endoscopy and was supposed to have a colonoscopy, but all I remember is being wheeled down. They gave me an IV, and I woke up and there's like tons of doctors around, and they couldn't do the colonoscopy because the tumor was causing like obstruction. It was like right there. They couldn't get through. So I woke up, all these doctors, and that's when they're like, we found a mass. It's probably cancer. You know, we're going to have to get a surgical oncologist in to see you. So they took me back up to my room, and within 5 minutes, not even, the surgical oncologist came into my room, and he said to my mom, like, if this was my daughter, I would do surgery now. So they wheeled me down to the OR. And he explained to me, he was like, you could have a colostomy bag when you wake up. You know, we really don't know until we get in there. And in my mind, I'm scared. I've never had major surgery. Then I'm thinking like cancer, like chemo. I'm going to lose my hair, like all the crazy things, you know. So I go into the OR. I don't remember anything, and I woke up, and the first thing I looked for in recovery was like, do I have a colostomy bag? And thankfully I didn't, but yeah. So surgery went well. I was in the hospital. So everything kind of like, I had no time to process anything because everything just happened so fast, you know, and it kind of put things in perspective. Like, I knew within me that those 2 years when my stomach was hurting and I just knew something wasn't right, but the doctors are like, oh, you're young, kept on like passing me off and whatnot. And then it just turned into like a horror story. Just trust your intuition when you feel as though something isn't right and you need further help. You need to advocate. Like, I'm not going to leave this doctor's office until you do a test. I'm not going to, you know, because I would hate for someone to end up in my shoes, but I didn't know. I was going to the doctors, and at one point I felt like I was crazy because I'm like, you know, here's this girl. I mean, even my friends, I'd say to them, like, we would be out to dinner, and I'm like, my stomach's hurting. I would cancel plans because, and then I didn't want to be the girl that has like terrible stomach aches all the time. I was like, maybe it's anxiety, social anxiety. Like, it was driving me insane. Yep. So when I woke up in the recovery room, I mean, the doctor wasn't there. My parents were there, and they did take me up to the oncology floor where I was a patient until I could heal. And I remember the doctors coming in, but they couldn't tell me until the results came back from pathology. So, you know, I'm in the hospital. I just had this big surgery. My mind's a million places. So I'm like worrying, like, I have cancer. Am I, you know, like, did it spread? Am I going to live? It's just like everything comes crashing in, and yeah, you don't know. So I had to get myself better. And once I was discharged from the hospital, I had a follow up with the oncologist, the surgical oncologist. And that at that appointment, I remember both my parents came, and I was sitting on the exam bed, and he told me it was stage 3 cancer. So after the surgical oncologist, like, he pretty much diagnosed me, told me, you know, the stage. I went to see just the oncologist, and he went over my treatment plan with me, the pathology and all that. So Again, both my parents came with me, and I remember I, I was so nervous, scared to death because, I was like, I'm going to have to get a port, chemo, I'm going to lose my hair. Like, you just don't know. I've never had cancer. I didn't know the side effects or how it was going to feel. So I remember him telling my parents, like, the cancer had gone into some of the lymph nodes. They did cut them out during the surgery, but I will have to do chemo to make sure, the cancer's cells don't divide into other parts of my body. So he told me I would do a chemo regimen of oxaliplatin and Zeloda. So I got a port placed in my chest, and once every 2 weeks I would go in for chemo infusion, and every day for 2 weeks I would take two chemo pills, in the evening. Well, one in the morning, one in the evening. So my side effects, and my oncologist said this to me, he was very surprised, were very minimal. I had a little bit of hair thinning, more so like neuropathy in my fingers and my feet. I had a ton of cold sensitivity. So after I would get the chemo infusion, for about a week, I couldn't have cold water, or everything had to be pretty much room temperature. So, of course, and this is sad to say, but I was the youngest patient going into chemo. Everyone else was, I'd probably say, 50 and older. And, I'm coming in, I'm this young girl, I still have my hair, and a lot of these patients are sick. And I just tried to, I tried to be very positive. I would bring in little note cards and hand them out to patients. I brought in a lot of like word searches and positivity coloring books, because they really like help, take my mind off of everything else that's going on. There's also these little crafts on Amazon that I would buy, and they're little like sticky coloring pages, and you kind of put the gem to the number, and they make very beautiful pictures. I just wanted to keep on living life and make it as normal as possible, because I think that's what helped me most get through the chemo and just the whole, phase that I was going through dealing with cancer. So when I was going through chemo, usually go in the morning. So every morning they would draw my labs, check my cancer markers, and all that, and make sure things were on the road to like recovery. If I had low iron, or if they saw a red flag within my labs, they would check with the oncologist. A few times I had a few iron transfusions. If I needed potassium or sodium, they would give that to me. Yeah. So I didn't really have any scans until after my chemotherapy ended. So after my treatment, my insurance kept denying a PET scan. So I couldn't have a PET scan, and I had a CT scan. But the reason, I didn't know any of the results until I saw the doctor. I followed up with the doctor, and he's like, things look great. Your cancer's in remission. But within me, I was like, I really want to get a PET scan, like, because I feel like that's, it scans your whole body, and I felt like it would help me sleep better. So I really pushed for that, and he's like, I don't think you need it, but after all that I've gone through, because he's like, labs look good, this CAT scan looked good, but to ease my mind, I was like, I really want to get a PET scan. So I was able, well, the nurse navigator was able to contact insurance and get an authorization. I was able to get a PET scan. So everything, I still have the spot on liver and lung, but it did not grow in size. So they're not very concerned about that, but they'll continue to monitor every 3 months. I'll go in for a CT scan, lab work. Every 8 weeks, I get my port flushed, and. Well, I will say, since my diagnosis, my anxiety is pretty bad. Every little ache and pain, I'm like, oh, is something wrong? And the oncologist told me that is normal. I try not to think too much about it, but to help, I mean, if I have a test coming up at the doctor's, or I do take anxiety medicine prescribed by the oncologist to help like ease me, so I'm not too stressed out. But the oncologist did reassure me, because at my last oncology appointment, he's like, your cancer is in remission. And then I was like, in my head, then what? What if, what if I feel a pain and something? But he said, you're going to get stomach aches. You're going to get the stomach flu. Just try to not think worst case scenario every time you feel something. I would say to what I've learned through my experience is to advocate for yourself. When your intuition is telling you something's not right, fight to get your voice heard. I knew something was not right, and unfortunately, I'm young, I'm 30. I was 32 at the time of my diagnosis. The doctors, I mean, how often do you hear of a 32-year-old female getting diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer? But it's because, colonoscopies aren't necessary until you're a certain age. And where I think as though that should be changed, because, I mean, I'm proof. Stomach pains for 2 years, and the doctors just, oh, you're fine, you're young. But I knew within me something was not right. I just want to you have to be positive. Unfortunately, like, cancer is a scary diagnosis, and your world comes crashing down. But if you just think positivity and try to keep pushing forward, you're gonna have bad days, but take those bad days and turn them into good days. Go for a walk, get outside, try to stay involved in activities, hang out with friends. Yeah, just do things to keep your mind off of what is happening, even though it's so hard to do. But for me, that was like my saving grace. My friends calling to check in, sending a text message, like asking if I needed anything. Yeah.